Hello everyone, this is Frank DeMora with the End Times Research Ministry. Today is January the 10th, 2017. What I'm about to show you is taken from my book called The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth that you see on the front page of my website. And if you just found my YouTube channel, I'd like to invite you to go over to my website. Just scroll down and you'll see the link where you can click that link and get my book today for free. According to the warnings by God found in the Old Testament, there's a prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled yet. I know that there have been many people who've been talking about the prophecy. I've been covering the events leading up to this prophecy for a very long time, and I'd like to share some important news to many people who just found my website. This has to do with, of course, Israel. This also has to do with the Arab nations, the Islamic nations, who God promised that in the last days, he even says in the latter days, that these Islamic nations, and he specifically names them, would come against the nation of Israel, thinking that they are going to destroy the nation of Israel. Now, what I found very interesting is what the Lord specifically shows us in his word. I'm going to take you over there to show you, and then I'm going to bring you over to the current events to show you that what we are seeing from the word of the Lord is identical to that warning when you compare it to the events that are taking place in the last days leading up to this war we see in the book of Ezekiel. I'm not going to cover the entire chapter. What I'm going to do is just show you where it is in Ezekiel chapter 38, where the Lord prophesies against specific nations that are destined to come against the nation of Israel. And you'll see that right up front. It says, "And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog in the land of Magog, and the chief prince of Matesh and Tubal, and prophesy against them." Now, when you read down the scriptures, you'll see that there are many people that will be coming against the nation of Israel. Just for a short glimpse, he tells us Persia, which is today modern-day Iran, Ethiopia, everybody knows Ethiopia, and Libya. And, of course, he gives a list. Now, when you get into my book, I'm going to give you the complete list, as we see in the book of Ezekiel, and I'll tell you exactly who they are. But for this video, I just want to hammer in on some really important events that, as I said, many people may not know. And of course, here in verse 8, it says, "In many days thou shalt be visited." Now get this, "in the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel." Now, what this is talking about is when Israel was born again as a nation, and they have obviously been born again as a nation. We know that from May 14th, 1948. Taken out of the wasteland. You'll see this, that when Israel was born as a nation, they were actually living in what was considered a wasteland, and they transformed it just the way God said that they would be doing. Now, when you scroll down, you'll see that it says, "Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, and thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands and many people with you." It's going to be massive. Islamic nations, probably millions and millions, ascending on Israel, who at that time thinks that they're living in security. How do we know this? Take a look at verse 11. "And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates." Now, when you get into my book, I'm going to show you actual pictures from Israel. When I was in Israel, I went both on the Palestinian side and the Israeli side to show you these bars, gates, and walls. Now, they're still standing right now. And the reason why is because Israel does not feel safe enough at this point to take down those bars, gates, and walls. And of course, something is going to happen to allow Israel to feel safe enough to take down these bars, gates, and walls. And I believe that that event will take place prior to the Ezekiel war. And that war will be the Psalm 83 war, but that's for another time. And if you want information on that Psalm 83 war, just go to my book and you'll see peace and safety. And in that chapter, I cover the Psalm 83 war, because according to the prophecy, when they're calling for peace and safety, sudden destruction will come. And I believe that once that war is over, Israel will feel safe enough to take down their bars, gates, and their walls. So now I'm going to move to verse 13, and we'll end it right here. This is the important section that I want to show you as it relates to what's happening currently. Sheba and Dedan, which you should know is Sheba and Dedan, is Saudi Arabia. Please keep these names in mind, and you'll see why it's so important. And the merchants of Tarshish. Tarshish in the Old Testament is Great Britain. The signia of Great Britain, or the crest for Great Britain, happens to be lion. It says, with all the young lions. All right, so who are the young lions? They are the United States, Canada, and Australia, as they broke away from the British government. Now, why am I giving you this information? Take a look at a section of my book, and it'll help me explain it to you. It says this in my book. For the past 8 years, while President Obama has been saying he would support Israel, he allowed Iran to keep working on producing a nuclear bomb. In May of 2012, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia were taking part in a military exercise that, when I saw the name of this exercise, immediately I recalled what the Lord wrote in Ezekiel chapter 38. Let me show you what the Lord pointed to. Ezekiel 38 tells us that Great Britain, you'll see the flags there, which is Tarshish in the Old Testament and is known as the lion, the United States, Canada, and Australia, which are the young lions, a break-off from the mother lion Tarshish, are in the area of Saudi Arabia, which is known as Sheba and Dedan, at the time the Ezekiel attack against Israel breaks out. So there are military exercise in the very area of which the Lord warned about in Ezekiel chapter 38. Not just the area, but the very exact nations that the Lord pointed out in that chapter are taking military exercises together, working together in the same area. Do you think this is a coincidence? It isn't. This is a prelude to what the Lord showed us all the way back in that Old Testament. Now, when you scroll down into my book, you'll see that I go back to May of 19th of 2015, because every year that I was watching, I noticed that this eager lion was not just in 2012, but it was going on every single year. And not only that, but you could see it in red. They were the same nations: Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, which is Tarshish, Saudi Arabia. And I did a search just to make sure and to drive my point home. If you go to Wikipedia, which many people around the world do, you'll see young lion. And when you look at the information about the young lion, you will see that it is an annual exercise. In other words, every single year, these nations get together under the banner of Eager Lion. And if you notice, I had highlighted it for you in blue. The United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, the United States, and Saudi Arabia are involved in this military exercise that takes place every single year. Now, when the actual assault takes place, there will be nations that will not be participating in the Ezekiel chapter 38. But what I wanted to show you here is that there are exercises. And as I said, I don't believe the exercise name, Eager Lion, is a coincidence. I just believe that the Lord is showing those who have been on the watch, and as we watch these events taking place, they understand what the Lord has been saying to us. And so the Eager Lion is actually just the prelude for the young lions and that attack that will take place on the nation of Israel in the last days. Now, as far as the year 2016 goes, take a look at this article from the U.S. Department of Defense. This came out May 23rd of 2016. You'll see Eager Lion exercise highlights U.S. Jordan force integration. So again, in the year 2016, this exercise, military exercise that we see mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38, as far as the area and the people that are involved, I've shown you that it is the exact same people that the Lord mentions. So it's worthwhile keeping your eyes on the nations involved in this war that God points to. Now I'd like to share two important factors that could influence this Ezekiel chapter 38 attack on the nation of Israel. First of all, Donald Trump is going to take office January the 20th of 2017. Donald Trump has made it very clear that he was going to be a staunch ally and supporter of the nation of Israel. I don't believe that this is a coincidence, because if we're reading the prophecy correctly, and so far the very nations, as I already showed you, are the same nations in these military exercises in the Middle East, then Donald Trump would remain and be that strong ally for Israel. Now, earlier I mentioned about the Psalm 83 war. And we know for sure that Jerusalem is a burdensome stone. All you have to do is go and read Zechariah chapter 12, where the Lord revealed to us in the last days that Jerusalem would be a burdensome stone for all the nations. And that has also come to pass exactly as the Lord predicted was going to happen in the last days. So in today's news from CNN, I'm just going to give you the headlines, but you should go over there. There's a video there that came with this news headline that shows the Jerusalem problem in the forefront. Take a look at the headline. Trump pushes U.S. embassy move in Israel amid outcry. Keep in mind that Paul the apostle was told by Jesus Christ that when they're talking or calling for peace and safety, sudden destruction would come. So you put what Paul wrote to us, and you also combine that with the Psalm 83 war, and it certainly is worth watching that the call for peace and safety over maybe possibly moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem could set off an Arab war that we see prophesied in Psalm 83, of which the Palestinians are going to play a major role in. Now, let me make this picture a little bit more clearer for you. For this, I want to go over to the Jerusalem Post. This information came out January the 3rd of 2017. Look at the headline. Bloodshed will follow if Trump moves U.S. embassy to where? Jerusalem. Again, connect the dots with the prophet Zechariah about Jerusalem being a burdensome stone. And now also connect the dots with Thessalonians, the call for peace and safety, and when you hear that call, sudden destruction. Listen to what this video had to say from this Jerusalem Post article. Now, Psalm 83 tells us of a major confrontation that's coming, a major move that will form a confederacy of nations that border the nation of Israel, of which the Palestinians play that major role. And look what they say. We must prepare for a new confrontation with the new U.S. administration. Obviously, they're talking about Donald Trump, which has declared clearly and audaciously that Israel and its settlements are legitimate and legal. And has sent a delegation in order to move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I believe that any American act of stupidity will ignite the Palestinian territories, and that the U.S. administration, along with the Israeli arrogance in continuing its settlement activity, will bear responsibility for the return of the bloodshed in the Palestinian territories. This is a prelude showing us the fulfillment of that Psalm 83 war is in our sights. And it just might be, again, over this holy city that Zechariah talks about that will ignite a new confrontation that will fulfill not only the Psalm 83 war, but make it so that the Israelis will feel safe enough after that war to take down the bars, gates, and the walls like I showed you earlier in this video. So hopefully now you're starting to see the connection and how you're starting to see that events prophesied are connecting each other. But there's one more element that I want to show you that has to do, obviously, with the call for peace and safety and moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and who's doing it. Now let's go back again to Ezekiel chapter 38, where he talks about the young lions. And since Canada was a break-off of Tarshish or the lion, and Canada has to be an ally of Israel, take a look like Donald Trump, what the conservative Kelly Leach is saying about what she'll do if she gets elected in Canada. The news that I'm bringing to you comes from Al Jazeera. It came out December the 30th, 2016. Canada MP as PM. I will move Canadian embassy to Jerusalem. There's a picture of Kelly Leach, and it says, following the passage of a recent anti-Israeli resolution at the UN Security Council and subsequent condemnation by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry of Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria and eastern Jerusalem as being illegal, candidate for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada, Kelly Leach, vowed to move the Canadian embassy to Jerusalem if elected as Prime Minister. And it gives you some more information. What she said in an earlier post, Leach had said, the Conservative Party of Canada stands for democracy and with Israel. As leader, I will protect and strengthen the special bond between our people. So just like Donald Trump, who is forging this cohesiveness with the nation of Israel, and it just so happens that it is one of the break-offs of Tarshish or Great Britain. So it's just showing us that these nations that are mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38 are really holding together. And in the process, they may be festering what's going to take place over the city of Jerusalem as they make plans to move the embassies over to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. Now, let's look at one of the other young lions, the nation of Australia. As you'll see from the current events, Australia now is thinking about doing the same thing that Canada and the United States is doing, and that is wanting to move their embassy out of Tel Aviv to go to Jerusalem. I don't believe that this cohesiveness between the young lions is a coincidence when it comes to Israel and the holy city of Jerusalem. The news I'm giving to you today came out January the 2nd, 2017. Look at this. Tony Abbott criticizes aid to Palestinian authorities, suggests moving Australia's embassy to Jerusalem. I'm going to give you the highlight of the article. It says, another way for Australia to demonstrate its unwavering support for Israel as the Middle East only liberal pluralist democracy might be to join any move by the Trump administration to move its embassy to Jerusalem, Mr. Abbott said. So I ask you, is it a coincidence that you have Canada, Australia, and the United States wanting to do the very same thing? My heart is telling me that it's not a coincidence. It's a wake-up call for completion of a prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled yet. This next article that came out just the day before the close of 2016 from the Huff Post deals with Theresa May. Theresa May was the person that was just elected as Prime Minister of Great Britain, or Tarshish, if you will. And as you can see from the headline, Theresa May edging towards Donald scolds John Kerry over Israel. And I believe that part of this edging towards Donald Trump will be just like Australia and Canada, edging towards moving the embassy out of Tel Aviv into Jerusalem. Theresa May is a staunch supporter of Israel. Look at the article. It says, Britain scolded U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry for describing the Israeli government as the most right-winged in Israeli history, a move that aligns Prime Minister Theresa May more closely with President-elect Donald Trump. After U.S. President Barack Obama enraged the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by refusing to veto the UN Security Council resolution demanding an end to Israeli settlement building, Kerry's public rebuke of Israel has unsettled some allies such as Britain. Amid one of the United States' sharpest confrontations with Israel since 1956 Suez Crisis, Kerry said in a speech that Israel jeopardizes hopes of peace in the Middle East by building settlements in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. So again, East Jerusalem, that's where the most holy site is for the Jews and the Muslims. And this is where Zechariah points to the end times troubles that will begin over Jerusalem. Now I'm going to turn to the BBC News. I'm going to go to June the 24th of 2016. The Brexit. David Cameron to quit after UK votes to leave EU. Keep in mind, he's the leader of Great Britain, or if you will, of the Old Testament, Tarshish. And now that Great Britain has voted to leave the European Union, this nation is free to do whatever they want, and that includes militarily. Now, as part of the European Union, they would be confined and obligated to do what the European Union is doing. So, for example, if the European Union didn't want to support Israel, Great Britain, no doubt, would have to go along with that. But because of the Brexit, because of the UK or Tarshish leaving the European Union, they would be more likely to do whatever they want, and that would include being friends with Israel and remaining strong allies with guess who? Australia, Canada, and the United States. So there's a lot of things that are going on in the news that are really connected. Hopefully now you'll see why I find it so important to understand and keep on the watch for the nations that are listed in the Ezekiel chapter 38 prophecy. Just as the Lord warned us in the latter years, this would take place, and that is why we're seeing these developments happening in our generation. And that is why I gave you the information about Saudi Arabia, which is Sheba in Dedan. That's why I gave you the information today about Great Britain, which is Tarshish. And that is also the reason why I connected the dots between Canada, the United States, and Australia, as we see them as the young lions, the break off of the mother lion, Great Britain. So what to look for in the near future? Look at verse 14, and this is where we're going to end it, where the Lord said this, Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say unto Gog, and this is the leader of the attack, Thus saith the Lord God, In that day when my people of Israel dwelleth safely, thou shalt not know it. That is the time when this attack will take place. So watch for Israel has to be living in relatively, or at least what they think is relatively peace and security, because that is the time that this massive attack will take place, just as it's outlined in verse 15 of that same chapter, where we see that this army will come out of the northern parts, many people with this invading army to try to take out God's people, the Jews. This is the reason why I spend so many hours studying and bringing the news to you, connecting the dots, the warnings from the Bible to current events, to show you that our Messiah, Yeshua Jesus Christ, is not far off, and you need to get ready, because if you're not ready and he comes, you're going to wish that you were. Please Take advantage today of my book, The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth. You can have it today for free. This is Frank DeMore with the End Times Research Ministry. God bless.